University of Texas, San Antonio, and Kalpana Kunda Iyengar. We're going to present a paper on the Kahani Literacy Project, Culturally Efficacious Story Writing. Okay, the floor is yours.
Kalpana, can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you also try to switch on your camera?
Yes.
Okay. And I saw that Howard entered the room as listener, so we cannot hear him.
No, I think he has changed his status.
No, at the moment I can see that he has. He has the icon of the headsets beside his name. So, okay, I see that he's changing now.
I think he will.
Yeah.
Good morning, and my apologies to Carmen, my sincere apologies for interrupting, but that was a fascinating study.
Kalpana?
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
All right.
Good morning.
So our presentation is focused on a culturally congruent literacy project called Kahani. Kahani means story in Hindi. It's a language, the national language of India. So the Kahani came about because of the lack of inclusion of Indian worldviews or epistemologies or culture heritage language literacy in schools in America. So it's the background for the Kahani Literacy Project. Dr. Smith?
Yes, and we'll go to the next slide. What is unique about Kahani is that this project is an example of how literacy instruction can incorporate the aspects of particular culture. And that is especially important for marginalized or minoritized groups. The Kahani project is actually based on a mainstream approach to literacy instruction, to writing instruction. Dr. Iyengar has a lot of history with the original version. Kahani, however, is, and we can look at the next slide. I don't know if I can, do I have permission to move to the next slide?
If you are the presenter, you can move to the slide.
Okay.
Oh, I'll move it. I have it. Thank you.
Okay, and this just tells you where we're from. We're from Texas. Okay, and the next slide. When you look at language arts instruction, or sometimes it's called English language instruction, or sometimes it's called reading and writing instruction. But one term is called the language arts. And so what you find are very few studies that look at the progress of Asian Indian students. At least in American schools, you have very few studies. And that is probably because most of our research dollars on children in schools is earmarked for groups that seem to experience problems, that have academic challenges. And Asian Indian American children are a group that generally do not present difficulties in language arts instruction. Dr. Iyengar?
But we have to talk about the model minority myth, right? Just because they don't have behavioral problems or they are considered academically high achievers, it does not mean that they are shielded from microaggression or discrimination, disparagement because of their religion, language, culture, and heritage. So it's important for us to consider all the groups, to highlight the culture of all the groups in schools. So the socio-pedagogical context of the Kahani project is when we reviewed the traditional curricula for literacy and language arts, indicated a paucity of focus and opportunities for diasporic AIA. or any minoritized youth like Latinx or African American here in the US to learn about their heritage culture to an appreciable degree. Some schools, they don't even have an example or maybe a slice of from the culture. So that's the reason why we organized this Kahani project based on the Kuntos project. That's a story writing project.
And so we can look at the critical knowledge, the TCRK, which is a term that Dr. Iyengar created, and teaching for cultural. Dr. Iyengar, did you want to speak to that, TCRK?
Yeah, see, TCRK is teaching cultural rhetorical knowledge, which is a derivative of rhetorical knowledge, focusing on the stylistics or the aesthetics or the communicative aspect of language. Okay, so interspersed with culture, integrated with culture, you teach cultural rhetorical knowledge. So what does it do? It provides a culturally efficacious. It provides culturally efficacious pedagogies, and it makes it authentic. That is culturally congruent, culturally framed, culturally, integrated instruction. And it also makes it culturally affirming, especially the curricula. So in other words, it provides, it helps students develop respect for community, their epistemologies, worldviews, their lived experiences, and it heightens the awareness of heritage and culture, which is very important for identity construction, especially in diasporic children who are transnational and multilingual, and the other aspects they bring into our classrooms. So the KLP is incongruent with the TCRK, where using the KLP model, you are making literacy instruction authentic and not, just lay emphasis on canonical literature or the traditional approaches to teaching. And it's
can I
go ahead.
Can I add something about the KLP?
Oh, that's your section. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's fine. The Kahani Literacy Project has teachers working with intentionality or with a focus on materials, on multimedia that displays different aspects of Indian culture. And that would include children's books, that would include classic stories, epics, that would include videos, music, live presentations. So the KLP is an experience. So it doesn't stay just in a book, but rather it's a multimedia approach to understanding culture. And the students have the opportunities to read, to write, and to dialogue around these aspects of their heritage culture. And I use the word heritage to remind the audience that we're working with Asian Indian children who are living in the diaspora. They are maintaining their cultural roots, but unless they have opportunities in which to engage, and in this case, they are engaging their culture through reading, they are engaging their culture through writing, they have a tendency to lose their cultural understandings. Okay.
So one of the reasons why we used multimedia is we use different modalities is that many Asian Indian American children have experiences with the visual, oral. It's an oral tradition predominantly. So we, instead of just using the linguistic modes of listening, speaking, reading, writing, we interspersed the workshop with live performances, multimedia, and picture books, just to give them a variety of modalities.
And so these are the central theories that undergird the project. There's a writing workshop model which was prepared or constructed through the NCTE, which is an organization in the United States that looks at the teaching of English, of reading and writing. But then you have in the middle and at the extreme right, community cultural wealth, and you have funds of knowledge. These two theories are produced through studies of poor neighborhoods, minoritized neighborhoods. And in the case of Yoso and community cultural wealth, her research shows us that poor communities, specifically poor Latino communities, often possess skills that may not be obvious to mainstream populations and may not be within mainstream populations. And the funds of knowledge refers to a study that Louis Small and colleagues did back in the 90s. And again, he looked at a poor Mexican American community. And what he discovered is that there were many talents and many skills that the membership possessed that were often ignored by the school curriculum. So the funds of knowledge is an approach whereby the teacher enters the community, acting like an anthropologist, the teacher discovers what it is that the community does well. For instance, it's very common for there to be one person that can bake a wedding cake for 500 people without ever having gone to chef school. Or there are mechanics who've never gone to school, but they know how to repair automobiles. And so again, there is a lot of valuable knowledge in poor communities that's often overlooked or not celebrated by the mainstream curriculum.
So the community cultural wealth and funds of knowledge both are asset-based approaches. Okay, the community cultural wealth has 6 capitals: linguistic, social, cultural, familial capitals, and then the funds of knowledge also is an asset base. But right, I want to say something about the writing workshop model. Like the previous presenter was talking about cooperative, collaborative, the cool approach. So writing workshop model is used across the curriculum, in schools in America. But the only issue was that there was no explicit mention of cultural aspects. So it is socio-culturally created, writing workshop where the teachers give agency to students to construct knowledge by discussing among, in small groups or whole groups or elbow partner. But the Kahani project integrates the writing workshop model with culture as the framework.
And the next slide. So again, the key components of the Kahani Literacy Project, it's Indic-centric, meaning that the ways of knowing, the worldview, the customs, the traditions, the interpretations that emanate from India and Indian culture are privileged in this writing experience. By using the students' home culture, we anticipated that there would be increased student engagement because they were studying about themselves. They were studying about their people. They were studying about their culture. And they were doing this in a habitus, in an environment that was supportive of who they were as cultural beings. As they engaged in various activities, their indigenousness or that of being an Indian was validated. There was no disparagement. Frequently in American schools, in US schools, Indian children tried to hide their culture. They tried to pass they often feel embarrassed to talk about what is very normal and very common in their world, because mainstream students and often the mainstream teacher doesn't necessarily appreciate the ways that certain things are done. And for me, it's important because as the children have the opportunity to engage in different types of literacy events, both in writing and also visual, it contributes to their ethnic identity, their identity construction. Remember, Asian Indian kids, like all bicultural individuals, have two cultural worlds. They have the heritage culture as part of their world, and they have their host culture. And so bicultural individuals, Asian, Indian, American, Latinos, um, all bicultural individuals have to contend with constructing a unified identity, which is produced from their two cultures. And so this Kahani project also gives them an opportunity to explore different aspects of their heritage, allowing them to decide which elements they choose to embrace or which elements they may ultimately ignore. Dr. Inga.
Yeah, so the two aspects, with the components of KLP. One is students have topic choice. The teachers do not assign the topics, but if they have difficulty in selecting, choosing a topic to write, then we offer a mini lesson, which is part of the writing workshop model. And also, it's the diasporic Asian Indian children, like any diasporic children, they easily move from one world to another world in which they are situated. It's like translanguaging, talking about two different languages with ease because we have competence in both the languages. So these children have experiences with both the worlds, so they're easily able to travel between the worlds. But the problem is in schools, they do not have freedom to express about one of their cultural worlds.
Very good. And we have about 4 minutes left.
Oh, we got to.
So the methodology, Dr. Yenga passed out flyer to centers where we would logically find Asian Indian children, including the dance schools, the music classes, and Sunday schools or temple schools. We began data collection in 2008, and to date we have 275 participants, and we have the same number of kahanis. The kahani refers to the written narratives. Okay. The students, by and large, were middle class, upper middle class. They were all Asian, Indian, American children. There were some children who were not Asian, Indian, American that wanted to participate. They were allowed to participate, but that data was not included. And also with the demographics, the children came from households in which the parent had, at least one parent had a college degree. Next slide, Dr. Yenga.
Well, we did purposive sampling because we were looking for generative rich data. So, okay, and then we applied a thematic analysis, and then the caveat is to appreciate their writings. It was important to remember that the diasporic AA children were writing from memory, based on their travel to India or to based on the celebrations of festivals. And we approach the data with a priori codes. Some of the codes are family, celebration, religion, travel to India, naturally, based on their writings. And then the data subsequently reviewed and revealed posteriori themes, including they talked about how they were Americanized and the inconveniences, the negatives, but it was neutralized when they talked about the benefits and positive aspects. And then we collapsed the codes into categories. And then as a next step, next step in data reduction, we collapsed the categories into themes.
Okay, and we move forward. The most salient themes that we'll mention is that we found within the data set references to connection to family, friends, and traditions. And regarding celebrations, they talked about Deepavali,
Shankranti.
They talked about how they prepared foods and offered gifts to visitors during this time. They also talked about artistic expressions, Carnatic music, and Bharatanatyam dance. And we also found throughout the data set attempts at identity construction, where children, as we pass to the next slide, would talk about their Indianness, and they would talk about aspects of Indian culture that they held dear. And so with this exemplar, we see the process of identity construction, and I read, I would never ever go back and change my visiting the village. India is my home, my history, and the US is just the same, my home, my future. Both are equally important, and neither has made me who I am more than the other. They'll both be in my heart, and I can't imagine blossoming into who I am today without these two places. More proud to be Indian, to have that colorful heritage. I couldn't be more proud to be in the US, to have all the opportunities I could want. So here's to being culturally diverse, Indian and American, a perfect balance. And that kind of exemplifies the tone of the Kahanis and the children's attempt to grapple with two cultures. Can we go to the next slide, Dr. Iyengar?
Okay, so there was a preponderance presence of this theme of artistic expression, like Carnatic music, and it could be Bharatanatyam dance. But it was intro in the Kahanis. There were references of various forms of entertainment and enjoyment. So several Kahanis signaled enjoyment and its effects on emotions. This one exemplifies, music affects our everyday life, connecting us to our emotions and our roots. There are many different reasons why people use music. Most of the reasons are for pleasure, but I believe that music should be used to help you attach to your family roots. Your family roots are what keep you attached to reality. So,
okay, and let's go to the next thing because we only have like a half a minute left.
I think this is a conclusion implication. I think we are done.
Exactly. And so when Asian Indian American children are afforded writing opportunities, in which their culture is supported, they will write about their culture. They will grasp at the opportunity to explore their heritage as they develop their reading and writing skills. The Kahani Literacy Project demonstrates that culturally framed literacy instruction is possible and beneficial. And instructional approaches like the KLP provide for literacy development and cultural scaffolding. Dr. Iyengar, you get the last word.
Yeah, as these are the implications, we have just added it too. So educators who strive for culturally efficacious pedagogies need not forfeit meaningful, rigorous instruction to address culture. As they compose original texts, students leverage their available cultural resources to engage in writing development and deepen their understanding of heritage and familial connections, and thereby construct a healthy ethnic identity. Thank you.
Thank you all for your attention. And the PowerPoint and our text is available through the conference, so you can read it in detail if you so choose.
Anybody has any questions? We are willing to answer.
Thank you. Can you hear us?
Yes.